J.D. Vance entered a primetime interview bracing for challenging inquiries. Yet when the host made a disparaging remark about Trump, his reply rendered the entire studio silent. The studio was awash in blinding lights, reflecting off the polished glass table that stood between Senator J.D. Vance and his interviewer. The atmosphere buzzed with the energy of final touches. As producers murmured into their headsets, camera operators fine-tuned their angles, and a makeup artist carefully applied powder to the host's forehead. The atmosphere was dense, brimming with a sense of expectation that had been accumulating ever since the segment was revealed. The broadcast was a prime-time spectacle, a high-stakes political interview captivating millions nationwide. J.D. Vance found himself in a discussion about President Trump's latest policy decisions. Yet the audience sensed that the conversation would delve deeper, especially with this particular host across from him. Elliot McManus was a seasoned political commentator, honed by years of intense discussions and recognized for his incisive observations. He had crafted a profession centered around provoking reactions, particularly regarding Trump and his followers. The crowd was primed for a clash, and with Vance, a devoted Trump supporter, occupying that seat, they were on the verge of witnessing it. The timer on the teleprompter reached its final moment. The crimson light flickered to life. "Senator Vance, I appreciate your presence," McManus started, his tone polished and practiced. Vance, clad in a tailored navy suit, offered a brief nod. "Thank you for the kind invitation. The niceties were destined to be fleeting." McManus leaned in a bit, his hands coming together on the desk. "Let's dive straight in. The current administration is advancing policies that a number of individuals, even from your own political faction, consider to be excessively radical. Some observers argue that he is placing personal allegiance above the nation's welfare. You've stood by him through every challenge. What is the reason?" The phrasing was deliberate. The tone was sharp. Vance found himself in familiar territory once again. He understood the mechanics of it all, how the press orchestrated the narrative. He stayed calm and collected. He expressed his support for the president, stating that the effectiveness of his policies is evident. There has been notable economic expansion, a more assertive approach to global matters, and a genuine commitment to prioritizing American workers. That's the reason countless individuals cast their votes in his favor. McManus let out a breath through his nose, a brief glimmer of doubt crossing his features. However, what is the price to pay? It's important to recognize that a significant portion of the American populace views him as a danger to democratic values. Vance's jaw tightened, yet he maintained his composure. The phrase, "a threat to democracy," is frequently used these days. Yet if democracy is about heeding the people's voice, it's impossible to overlook that Trump emerged victorious because many resonated with his vision. Elections operate in that manner. McManus had more to say. He tilted his head, his voice taking on a tone that bordered on condescension. "While you might express that sentiment, let's face the truth. Isn't it true that Trump supporters seem ready to put the nation at risk for the sake of their allegiance?" As soon as those words escaped his lips, the whole ambience transformed. The exchange had lost its lightness, the thoughtful discourse replaced by a stark statement that struck with the force of a blow to the stomach. A soft whisper spread across the studio audience, with some gasping and others adjusting their positions in their seats. The control room was enveloped in silence, the producers immobilized behind the glass panel. McManus remained composed, patiently anticipating Vance's response, and he certainly delivered. Vance's grip on the table intensified, his gaze fixed on McManus with an intensity that was previously absent. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, as the unfolding events promised to shape the evening ahead. Yet no one could have predicted the level of intensity that was about to erupt. For a brief instant, J.D. Vance fixed his gaze on McManus, his face a mask of inscrutability. The stillness lingered, heavy enough to create a palpable tension in the air. If anyone in the control room had been clutching a coffee cup, it could have suspended in the air, frozen in time. The studio audience appeared uncertain about their response. Some shifted uncomfortably, a few murmured to their companions, while others remained still, observing with keen interest. A sense of anticipation hung in the air, as if the world held its breath, waiting for the inevitable to unfold. Vance finally leaned in, his voice soft and measured. "That's an utterly unacceptable remark." He spoke softly, yet his words struck with the force of a hammer. McManus blinked, pretending to be unaware. "In what way?" "You're not merely criticizing the president," Vance continued, his tone unwavering and composed, yet the sharpness in his voice was unmistakable. "You are belittling countless Americans, dedicated individuals who hold a deep belief in their nation. These are the people who have endured years of condescension from politicians as their communities fell apart. Their jobs disappeared, and the very institutions designed to support them labeled them as outdated for simply holding different values." McManus grinned, tilting his head slightly. "Senator, let's keep things measured. I'm merely highlighting that some may perceive their steadfast loyalty as, shall we say, unreasonable." Vance exhaled sharply, his head shaking in disbelief. "Once more, you're at it. Engaging in discussions about policy isn't your focus. Your inquiries lack sincerity. You jest. You disregard. Your perspective seems to suggest that those who hold differing opinions are either lacking in intelligence or pose a threat." A smattering of applause echoed from the audience. McManus lifted a hand, a hint of amusement in his expression. "All right, let's not stray from this point," Vance interjected, his voice elevating slightly, "because this is precisely why the public has lost faith in the media. You occupy this elaborate studio, viewing a significant portion of the nation as issues to be addressed rather than individuals with genuine worries." The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The individuals behind the glass shared knowing glances. The cameraman's hold on his rig grew firmer. McManus managed a laugh, though it sounded tight and uneasy. "Senator, let's focus on dialogue rather than a political address." Vance held him accountable. "Let's talk about something genuine, like the frustration people feel when they are belittled on national television simply for having a different voting perspective." This time, the audience responded. A blend of applause, whispers, and the occasional soft jeer directed at McManus. McManus organized his papers, a clear irritation etched on his face. "Okay, let's take a moment to pause and reflect." However, retreat was not an option, as what began as a fraught dialogue was evolving into something far more significant, and the situation was already eluding McManus's grasp. McManus let out a quick breath, rifling through his notes as though searching for an escape. His meticulously crafted questions suddenly seemed pointless. The conversation had evolved into something entirely unexpected. Vance, in contrast, had never been more focused. He had transcended the mere act of answering questions. He stood firm, addressing the millions tuning in from their homes, fully aware that they would resonate with this moment. McManus finally lifted his gaze, forcing a smile that failed to illuminate his eyes. "Senator, it seems we may be veering off course. This discussion was intended to center around policy, yet we have instead—" "We're still on course," Vance interjected. "This is the piece. This is the issue at hand. You bring conservatives onto your show not for an open dialogue, but to ensnare them, to lure them into sound bites that you can utilize later. And when that fails, you turn to name-calling. You just labeled millions of Americans as being under a spell of manipulation. Do you genuinely believe that's what journalism is?" McManus's jaw clenched slightly, yet it was sufficient. He said carefully, "I didn't label anyone as brainwashed. I noticed something intriguing." "An observation," Vance reiterated, nodding with deliberation. "Indeed. Do you also notice similar tendencies among those who align with you, the individuals who eagerly absorb every statement from your network and accept every narrative you present without skepticism? Is blind loyalty only an issue when it pertains to conservatives?" The crowd responded. The change was unmistakable at this point. McManus, typically commanding the situation, found himself on the back foot. He made an effort to regain his footing. "Senator, the distinction here is that this matter transcends networks or narratives. This pertains to truths. Many Americans perceive Trump's rhetoric as perilous. Are you really going to deny that?" Vance acted without a moment's pause. "I acknowledge that there are individuals who hold that belief. However, there is another point to consider. For years, you and the media have urged them to accept this narrative. You convey that message consistently day in and day out. persuading individuals that the candidate they chose not to support poses a fundamental danger to the nation. And then when his supporters resist, when they refuse to be defined by you, you feign surprise. McManus let out a derisive laugh. Senator, there's no one defining anyone. Vance drew closer. You just did that just 5 minutes ago. Yet another surge of appreciation. A handful of individuals in the audience rose briefly before promptly taking their seats again. McManus averted his gaze from the lens, searching for the upcoming pause in the broadcast. He was slipping away from control rapidly, yet he refused to surrender without a fight. Very well, he remarked, drumming his pen on the surface of the table. Allow me to pose this question to you. If this is merely a case of media bias, and if Trump's presidency is truly unifying and beneficial, then why do numerous individuals, including former officials from his own administration, express a different viewpoint? Vance remained unblinking. In Washington, it seems that many prioritize their roles over their core beliefs. It's not centered on Trump. It's about how he interrupted the established order. He transformed the landscape. Many individuals, including politicians, bureaucrats, and media figures, seem to be quite content with the traditional way of doing things. They desire its return. McManus let out another chuckle, though it lacked its usual strength. It seems that everyone is being dishonest. Aside from Trump and his followers. Vance cast him a glance. No, but when those who have consistently been mistaken about nearly everything suddenly anticipate our trust once more. I hope you can understand my doubts. The crowd burst into applause. This time, the whispers were resolute and unwavering. Cheers erupted in the air. McManus straightened his tie, acknowledging that he had been bested this time. However, this was far from finished. For beyond the confines of the studio, an even grander event was unfolding. In the control room, the producers were acutely aware of the gem they possessed. They had witnessed viral moments in the past. However, this was an entirely unique experience. McManus had relinquished command of the story, and the atmosphere in the studio mirrored that shift. J.D. Vance accomplished something that seldom occurs during primetime interviews. He had transformed the narrative on the host, shifting what was meant to be a structured debate into a profound confrontation. Beyond the confines of that studio, the digital realm had firmly established its dominance. As soon as the clip made its way onto social media, it took off rapidly. In just a matter of minutes, the platform was inundated with responses. The video was ubiquitous. Trimmed, refined, labeled, and redistributed. Conservative commentators lauded Vance's response, describing it as a brilliant example of addressing media bias. Commentators quickly sprang to McManus's defense, asserting that the senator had sidestepped substantive inquiries with superficial evasions. Yet, what is the truth? The opinions of the experts were irrelevant. The thoughts of those at home were what truly counted. For the countless viewers, particularly those who had experienced feelings of dismissal, mockery, or silence in the past, Vance's words resonated deeply. At last, someone has voiced it, one user remarked. He completely demolished McManus. This is the reason behind the growing distrust in the media, another responded. The video surged up the trending charts with astonishing rapidity. Memes emerged in less than an hour. Vance's intense, steadfast gaze superimposed onto action film posters featuring taglines such as, "The man who never wavers," and "Repeat that, I challenge you." Even the major networks found themselves compelled to report on it. Some attempted to minimize it, referring to it as an unfortunate exchange. Some presented it as evidence of the widening political chasm. Yet, regardless of their attempts to twist the narrative, one fact stood undeniable. The moment struck a chord. When McManus's network finally posted the official clip on their YouTube channel, the comment section had already erupted into a fierce battleground. McManus has just been revealed in real time. J.D. Vance is completely correct. The media's partiality has reached an alarming level. This is the reason we are unable to engage in genuine discussions these days. Excessive division among groups. Even individuals who oppose Trump found themselves aligning with one significant aspect. The media displayed a clear bias. And just when the chaos seemed to reach its peak, an event unfolded that elevated everything to an entirely new dimension. The network was compelled to take action. The ambience within the newsroom was charged with tension. Executives gathered in private, scrutinizing the footage, analyzing the online criticism, and attempting to manage the repercussions. The interview with McManus was anticipated to spark conversation. However, not in this manner. High-profile figures were already reaching out with calls. Some are enraged. There were those who worried about the implications for the network's credibility. Questions began to arise from advertisers. Still not securing sponsorships, yet there's an evident sense of discomfort. And, to make matters worse, the clip had overshadowed the interview entirely. It was more than simply J.D. Vance no longer. It revolved around trust. Prejudice. The belief that traditional media had ceased to be a trustworthy mediator in political discussions. The network had to respond swiftly. By midday, an official statement had been crafted. Last night's interview featuring Senator J.D. Vance and Elliot McManus ignited a significant and at times intense discussion. We uphold our dedication to integrity in reporting, yet we recognize that some viewers might perceive certain aspects of the discussion as lacking the balance and neutrality that our platform strives for. We are committed to encouraging open and respectful conversations among diverse political viewpoints. The statement was a masterclass in evasion artfully crafted to satisfy detractors while ensuring McManus remained unscathed. Yet, there were no takers. The remarks in the comments section beneath the network's Twitter post were harsh. So you acknowledge the bias, yet you don't seem to feel any remorse? Your recognition only comes after being exposed. Simply acknowledge that you didn't anticipate Vance would retaliate and proceed from there. In the interim, McManus had fallen into silence. Silence reigns with no tweets or follow-up commentary to be found. Vance, in contrast, was taking a different approach. He seized the opportunity, making appearances on several conservative talk shows in just one day. Every host was eager to delve into the exchange, and Vance was more than willing to sustain the dialogue. If the media truly believes in their impartiality, why do they seem to panic whenever someone challenges them? He inquired during one part. The host inclined their head in acknowledgement. They aren't fond of it when the dynamics shift. Precisely, Vance went on. And I'm not alone in this observation. This moment struck a deep chord. It surpasses my understanding. Individuals are weary of being labeled as the issue simply for holding different perspectives. His words echoed deeply. The interview transformed from a potential blunder into a pivotal moment, showcasing resilience amid a backdrop of media antagonism. However, as Vance's profile increased, the network continued its efforts in damage control. In the background, McManus faced mounting pressure to respond to the criticism. His credibility had suffered a setback, and the network was eager to reclaim the narrative. The inquiry was whether he would truly acknowledge his mistakes. Or was he on the verge of complicating matters further? Elliot McManus sat rigidly in his chair, the studio lights harshly illuminating him as he readied himself for his segment, this time not as the one asking questions but as the subject under scrutiny. This was unfamiliar to him. He had devoted years to mastering dialogues, crafting stories, and establishing the atmosphere. Yet now, the story had been wrenched from his grasp, leaving him powerless to reclaim it. He had been left with no alternatives by the network.